Hello, everybody. It's Argent here, and I'm here with my frequent co-host, Serp Kerp, and we're going to be talking about could Germany have done it? Could Germany have won World War II, or were they kind of just doomed to fail from the start? Probably the biggest of like alternate history timeline things.
Hello.
I can't really think of a bigger one. If any of you could you, Serp, think of one
The
that's
only
there with
one
my.
that really competes is Confederate victory, and then a distant third is active Cold War. But a
Mhm.
lot of times when active Cold War was written, like Red Storm Rising, it was actually like future tense.
Right.
So those are kind of the three that are competitors, but far and above Axis victory is the most popular form of alternate history.
Hmm. So I guess maybe to start off with, do you have like a straight yes or no? Could well, I guess.
I actually made a video where I answered this.
Okay, I mean aside from the using the weapon of mass destruction.
Uh, no, I can't give you a yes or no.
Okay, so we'll just talk about it. Does it make a difference between Germany winning or the Axis winning in general?
The Axis winning in general.
Because yeah, I can never.
Because I do you know that much about Japan in World
I
War
know a
Two?
bit about Japan in World War II.
Japan locally could have won Midway, or the carriers could be parked or destroyed during Pearl Harbor, and that could have massively changed. Just because the nature of naval warfare is so different than the nature of land warfare, you can just sink a bunch of ships all at once and completely cripple a navy for years or even decades.
Yeah, see, I don't know how much it matters. I just feel in terms of East Asia, the Japanese, I don't think really. I think it's overstated how much they knew what they were doing. Um, and I think just the production capacity difference between the two was just so big. I don't know if it ultimately
But
would
the
have
thing
mattered.
is that if Japan destroyed Midway, would the United States have agreed to a Germany first policy?
That's a good
Would that
question.
have would that have given Germany a lot more of a free hand? Because
You
these
mean
things all
Japan more
affect
of a
each
free
other.
hand?
No, Germany more of a free hand against the Soviet Union because the UK and the Soviet Union would have much less American help if America was much more gravely threatened by Japan.
Oh, you mean okay?
If
Sorry.
Japan
So,
had won Midway,
oh, sorry, I misunderstood you. So you're saying that they would have gone with a Japan first policy if they had have lost at
yeah, I'm
Midway.
pretty sure. So even if Japan won Midway, Japan could lose the war and then Germany could win the war or something like that, like the Fatherland book.
That's an interesting. I never really thought of that because I think regardless, I don't think there's any way really. I kind of doubt there's any real way that Japan could have beaten the U.S.
I
Or,
mean, suppose that they won Midway and then they somehow destroyed the Panama Canal, they probably could have won, or it's more likely they could have won.
well, I guess it depends in Japan. Like, what does a Japanese victory look like?
Yeah, well, that's always been the problem with the Axis victory for me. When do they win? And what does that victory look like, and what peace terms are there?
Okay,
Because
so
I doubt the Axis can win a total victory.
right. Well, the kind of victory you need to win in HOI 4 to come to the peace table. But maybe just to start off, so what do you think a German victory would have looked like? Like,
Hmm. How what Germany would have needed to do, or what the world would have looked like if Germany had
what
won.
they would have needed to do.
Okay. Well, destroy Britain through weapons of mass destruction, or defeat the Soviet Union to the point that Britain surrenders in some capacity, and then have a separate piece of the Soviet Union afterwards. Because I think what you're going to say is that Germany cut off Baku and say took Leningrad, took Moscow. Obviously, the Soviet Union is defeated as an offensive enemy, but the Soviet Union could just be like China in the way that Japan was fighting China. They could just have these huge kind of forts in the Urals and just take up huge amounts of German manpower and tell the Western allies just nuke their capitals until they surrender.
Oh, sorry. Just before we get into just Irish Cream tips $5. Thank you very much. Do you guys still watch Ryan Falk? I'm still a pretty big fan of his, and if so, what role will he serve in the right's future?
I haven't watched any of his recent videos. I don't know. Um,
Isn't he going through another bipolar autistic like?
uh, Maybe, but he's renamed his channel to pretend he's renamed everything to pretend he's left wing, so he wouldn't get doxxed. Instead of like separating the channels or just moving all the edgy stuff to BitChute like we did, he cleansed his channel and started pretending to be left wing.
Or is he? Because I don't know. He's just kind of.
Yeah, I haven't watched his videos in a while. I tried to watch a peer review video, and then I saw his video on one of the videos. I think he's made two on this topic now. I haven't seen the second one yet. I've been busy. There's a lot of stuff. My life's been kind of bumpy over the past few months.
Yeah, I haven't paid attention to him since the greatest anime betrayal.
Oh,
The top 10 anime betrayals. Anyway, sorry. So, okay. Here's just to kind of give my overview of it, and then maybe you could give your overview. So, on the question of could Germany win, I think there's one of two conditions Germany has to have to stand a chance in winning the war. Whatever definition you want to use, either they come to a negotiate, they somehow resolve the war on the West with the United Kingdom one way or another, or they decisively beat the Soviet Union and manage to take over the Urals, to take over the Caucasus oil fields. Because I feel like regardless of anything else, if they weren't able to secure a steady supply of oil, they were just going to lose the war eventually.
yeah. But again, you get to the question if they decisively defeat the Soviet Union, does the Soviet Union start playing like a only defender role for years or even decades on end like China did?
Well, that's true. Like my thinking though is if they could, how much does it matter if the Soviet Union east of the Caspian Sea remains in the war? Like to my mind, because we were talking about this the other day, where you were saying America was committed to if they had to use millions of troops to defeat Nazi Germany, they would. But my thinking,
or at least they would have used that to defeat Japan.
right? But my thinking is, if you get a scenario where Germany manages to exploit the Caucasus oil fields, they could rebuild the Luftwaffe. They could rebuild their armor corps.
It's just really hard for me not to envision if the Soviets knew for sure that they would lose the Caucasus oil fields, that they wouldn't destroy them to the fullest of their capacity.
They probably would have. So is your thinking then it doesn't matter because then the Soviets and the Germans will both lose and then America will just kind of show up?
America will just show up and nuke them.
Yeah.
But again, if that happens, will the Germans have their entire air force destroy Germany or the UK through firebombing as well? And will there just be a kind of a white peace between the Western Allies at that point? Because America can't engage in a war against Nazi Germany. There's no will if the UK drops out of the war. It's what I think that. It's funny, as weird as this sound, I think that the linchpin for victory or defeat is the status of the United Kingdom in the war against Germany.
No, that's 100% true. I feel the Germany probably would have just curb stomped Russia if the UK didn't stay in the war.
Yeah, I also think if the US didn't join and it was still just UK versus the Soviet Union, Germany would probably win anyway. Because I don't think the Soviet Union could sustain their offensives and how damaging they were to the German army and their own army from 1943, 44, 45 without extensive Western ally aid, primarily American.
Yeah, because I think people like to meme and say like, oh well, they sent their shitty tanks to them, and the Russians didn't want their tanks, but
It's not America's shitty tanks, it's Chef Boyardee, which built the Soviet army.
and aviation fuel because the Soviets weren't very
Yes.
good at making aviation fuel either,
Yeah.
or radios or that kind of thing. But yeah,
Trucks.
but like it's
Trucks provided a great deal of mobility that helped the Soviets because the Soviets, I think the Soviets probably, if you go back, they had near constant offensives with very little space in between them in 43, 44, 45, which completely would be exhausting if they didn't have to use American trucks. And keep in mind, without America's intervention, the U-boat war would have continued against the United Kingdom indefinitely.
Germany came pretty close to winning that actually, didn't
The
they?
naval war?
Yeah.
Oh, I always thought that was a meme.
Oh,
I
was
thought
it? Oh, okay.
U-boat war by Blair said that was a meme, and it's basically mostly propaganda. But I haven't read through that
Oh,
book.
I don't. Okay, well, they would have been much more successful, and it would have lasted longer if America hadn't have entered right away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because like, and I know we're jumping around a bit, but kind of the thing that's really fascinated me is the more I've kind of read about the Eastern Front, the more it's like Hitler was right, and the entire general staff was wrong. And
Have
it's
you read through Hitler's war?
I read like half of it. I need to go through and read that.
Yeah, I think that David Irving was right about that 110%, and it's just a monument to history, that book, when you realize this.
Sorry, what was the 110%?
That David Irving was right about the distaste in the general staff of the aristocratic generals against Hitler, and how Hitler usually was a better grand strategist than they were.
Because like most mainstream historians I've ever seen, like just say Hitler's crazy. Like when they talk about.
Well, okay, so when you went to high school, what was the story of World War II they told you?
We didn't really study World War II, but
Okay, so Hitler, should I go through mine?
sure.
Hitler was a crazy man. The Germans wanted revenge, so they picked this crazy man who from the beginning wanted to massacre all the Jews. They selected Hitler for no apparent reason other than to scapegoat the Jews for why they lost.
Yep, that's true.
Then Hitler allied with Stalin to conquer Poland. I guess they'll begrudgingly tell you that. I don't know if they told everyone else
No,
that.
well,
Maybe they didn't.
really study.
Maybe just Hitler invaded Poland, and then Germany walked around France's defenses because France was so stupid and cowardly, and defeated France, and it wasn't a very big deal. And then Britain was super duper brave to resist Germany. And then Pearl Harbor happens, and America saves the day. Hitler genocided the Jews, which was his plan from his conception in his mother's womb. And then D-Day completely flips the balance, and America wins the war within a year. But apparently also the Soviet Union was fighting Germany.
Maybe.
So now the Soviet Union is the enemy. And then we nuke Japan for revenge. Oh, and the Japanese were the most brave soldiers that ever existed, and that they would fight to the absolute last man, and that they were far more braver than not just the French, but all Europeans that ever lived in the history of the world.
Also, they were a good boy who didn't do nothing.
Well, they kind of like mention the rape of Nanking when I was in high school.
I really fucking hate the. Sorry, I know we're getting off topic. I just hate the fucking historical revisionism that Japan was a good boy who didn't do nothing.
Well, okay, I don't know if you know this, if you know that much about Japan in World War II.
I know a bit about it.
Japan didn't fight till the last man in the way that the Germans did, and it's largely a myth. the state of which Japan was would be like late 1943 compared to the state that Germany was. If you took them side by side,
Mhm.
Japan was still able to fight when they surrendered for at least years.
It's interesting because they launched like their biggest offensive of the war, Operation Ichigo, like right in I think it
Hmm.
was 1944.
Japan wasn't when Japan was isolated, and so Japan basically surrendered at the point of Normandy, while
Right.
Germany fought a year beyond when Japan was. If you put them like equivalent,
Hmm.
I don't even think it would because Germany fought until the entirety of Germany was overrun.
Until like Berlin, literally.
Yes, and Japan didn't. Japan lost like a few islands of their homeland and surrendered.
Right. I think didn't I don't think the Japanese army in China was like in that bad a shape until the very end of the war after Germany surrendered. Although I could be wrong. I didn't think it was the whole China thing just seems like a giant fucking shit show. Like
Oh yeah, because there's no way to win against China. They just retracted their armies and into these huge, dense Chinese mountains and built massive fortifications that the Germans couldn't assault directly, or
like
the Japanese couldn't assault directly, while there was a somewhat costly guerrilla war waged against them by the communists, and that the Japanese had such a small army and that they had no local support, so their entire occupation was just the railroads. So the communists could act completely unfestered throughout the entire countryside without the Japanese even attacking them. So they built up throughout the entire war with little Japanese
well, and the nationalists, to their
conflict.
credit, did the best job they could to actually fight off Japan. They just
Yes,
failed
but
miserably.
Japan wasn't really like Japan just kind of pushed the nationalists out of the cities and wasn't able to. They had so little numbers they couldn't really hold China. They just held the railroads in the cities.
Like I'm just looking at in Operation Ichigo, the Chinese, I think the KMT lost like 700,000 like soldiers, like some absurdly. I think they lost most of their remaining professional army, and it just doesn't really matter. Like there was kind of no win condition in China because they weren't ever able really to set up like a real. I know they had that what's his name, but it just seems like they were never really able to set up a feasible puppet government
Yeah.
like the way they were able to in Manchuria.
Well, there's no center of power they can support. At least there's a legitimacy in Manchu Kuo, a Puyi.
It's funny because I'm reading a book about a biography of the Showa Emperor, and it's just it has so much just double talk in it, and like because the Japanese are like complaining. It's funny because they complain about the white peril, like they use
Mhm.
those exact words, and they bitch about like racial discrimination and stuff like that. And then like we need to unite the Asian race at the same, but at the same time they'll also say they're like inferior subhumans in China and we must exterminate them. And like they don't see any kind of contradiction in that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, like they were
Well,
trying. Yeah, sorry, go on.
even Yamamoto famously basically said, "There's no way we can win this. We're just going to do it anyway."
Right, and I guess like there's various thoughts on this. There's the school of thought that's probably closer to like the mad monarchist, which is the war was America's fault. Uh,
Uh, what is that guy? The John Toland's perspective.
what was that perspective?
The John Toland perspective. He wrote Infamy. He was a revisionist of Pearl Harbor, who wrote the pretty famous book Infamy. where the idea that Roosevelt forced Japan's hand.
Yeah, by cutting off oil supplies.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't matter. Like, the revisionism doesn't really matter because it's obvious that if Germany didn't attack first, then the Soviet Union would have attacked, and the same with Japan.
You think America would
Japan,
have eventually just...
they were forced into a no-win situation, and the United States was justified in doing so.
Why would
Japan
you
was
say
acting incredibly aggressive.
because they had declared
There's
war.
no reason for them not to stop trading oil with Japan.
Well, Japan, that was after Japan had just declared war on like everybody in East Asia, wasn't it? Like, hadn't they just...
No, Japan. Okay, so what caused the oil embargo is that Japan started occupying the French territories in
Indochina?
Indochina. So it's only a natural thought that if they're going to occupy the French ones, they're going to expand and say occupy the Dutch ones, which was indeed their ultimate war goal, to attain more oil out of the Dutch East Indies. So it's only a natural response to try and act as aggressively as you can. The United States has no obligation to trade with Japan. I don't understand the idea that FDR should have kept trading with Japan. I understand that it would have caused the war, but Japan already invaded China and occupied French Indochina in an act of aggression.
When did they declare war on the United Kingdom? Was that before or after?
That was during Pearl Harbor.
Oh, so okay, right.
During Pearl Harbor, the day of December 7th / December 8th, they declared war on the United States, the Commonwealth nations, and the Dutch simultaneously, and invaded and attacked all at once.
What is the justification people give for like the attacking the Commonwealth? Just because it was there?
Well, they had to attack the Commonwealth if they're going to go to war to take the Dutch East Indies.
Right.
If they didn't declare war on the United States, then the United States could build up their entire navy as a neutral power in the Philippines, while Japan was invading the Dutch East Indies and like Burma and stuff.
I mean, yeah, I kind of feel in the case of...
They needed to attack all three at once if they're going... It's completely logically makes sense from a military point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Something that kind of comes across, though, when you look at this, is the very famous idea of when generals have a junta, they really, really suck at war.
Yeah, no.
And the more power you give to the military to develop grand strategy, the more likely it is that you'll lose.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we said, and as Irving says in Hitler's War, in the trilogy of books he wrote about it, Hitler's grand strategy decisions were far better than his general staff's grand strategy positions.
Well, everything worked really, really well, like up till 1940. Like, start 1941.
Or through 41.
41. He literally beat... Well, they couldn't beat France after 4 years of the previous war. He had just kind of curb stomped them. They curb stomped Poland. The UK was on the verge of collapse. Things had gone a lot better than they did in World War I for Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Also, I think it is kind of a meme. It irritates me a bit how like monarchists will just kind of give Japan a complete pass because they restored Puyi, meaning they put him in under house arrest in a shitty like former.
Well, I don't think Puyi. So, do you think Puyi was an actor who acted? Like, do you think he was a man-child, or do you think that he was a rational actor?
I think he was
I think he was a man-child who smoked heroin all day.
I'm biased towards kind of believing his biography. I know it was written by the Communist Party, but everything about it seems to jive with how the Japanese like how everything played out. So
Hmm.
I tend to think parts of it
I
are
mean, the guy's
exaggerated.
wife cheated on him with like a limo driver or something.
So I'm
The
pretty
Empress of Manchuria cheated on the emperor. I think he was a invalid.
yeah, he was like yeah, he was really fucked up. Um
Well, I think most of the history of this is like really far afield. Most of the history of the Chinese emperors was that they were invalids, and that they were a purely ceremonial role, and the day-to-day leadership was done by the eunuchs.
right.
And empress dowagers and eunuchs together usually.
Mhm. But yeah, I don't I think he was just a man child. I think he was like kind of I don't know, like severely developmentally disabled. So I kind of feel it's like it's just it's the most transparent of like cynical. um I don't know how to describe it. It's just very cynical on Japan's part.
Oh
um
yeah, to basically just capture this guy and use him for propaganda to give themselves some kind of legitimacy for their occupation and
yeah,
exploitation of Manchuria.
and it irritates me when people buy into it, largely just because they don't like the Republic of China.
To be fair, though, I think Toland's argument or the Mad Monarchist's argument towards the invasion of China itself holds some water.
That it was in part triggered by the Communist Party.
Well, yes, and that Japan had no effective control over its military, and the
Yes,
civilian
that's
government had
definitely true.
no, yeah, the civilian government had no effective control of its military, and if the local military wanted to start a war against China, Japan just had to follow the local military.
Yeah, the Japanese military was completely um, beyond the control of the civilian military. I think someone who is did actually have a lot of. I think the Showa Emperor probably had a lot more power than is generally thought.
So you agree with the revisionist or the American view during the war? That
Yes, I think I because
okay, good.
oh, why do you think that or
No, I don't. I haven't read enough about it. It's
um
just like it's very likely basically is that the clean Wehrmacht is the same thing as the clean Showa Emperor. They're the same shit.
yeah,
It's just something after the war that historians helped in the West to reinforce their allies of
um
their former enemy allies against the Soviet Union,
no,
so West
also the
Germany and
Japanese are
Japan.
just very dishonest when it comes to any aspect of their own history. Like I know all peoples are will say, "Oh, the Allies are the real racists. The Americans, I don't know, made up lies about the British." But when it comes down to it, like I think it's revisionism. Because they like there's this idea in the West at least that you had the Meiji Restoration, and then Emperor Meiji just went back to being a ceremonial monarch,
Mhm.
and the monarch just didn't do anything, and that's not really.
This self-serving myth that the Japanese tell themselves.
Yeah, and they just like it's kind of interesting. I'm gonna have to do a review of it when I'm finished it. But yeah, in the biography of the Showa Emperor, like it's really funny, like the revisionist history that was going on at the time, because like they taught the Showa Emperor that the emperor has always been the ruler of Japan. He's always had direct political power. Things like he's always been the driving force of the country. But we needed the Meiji Restoration because he wasn't the driving force of the country.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and they didn't notice any kind of like contradiction within that.
Continuity errors.
It's very much I don't know. Our mutual friend said it's because they don't have logos. So
Mm-hmm.
like things logical inconsistencies don't really matter.
Affect them.
Um, but yeah, it's there's that aspect to it. It's also interesting the schizophrenic view Japan has had during this period on its own path. Because like it went through periods of saying the samurai were like embarrassing barbarians, then to saying no, they were noble warriors, to no, it like they just went back and forth like on an almost yearly basis for a while.
Hmm.
And now we just have Japan was a good boy who didn't do nothing.
While Japan committed numerous war crimes, I don't think there's anyone who actually I don't think there actually is Unit 731 deniers, is there?
There's people who deny. If you
They
look,
deny, or they say. I mean, they sacked Nanking, right? It's just a matter of how many people they killed when they sacked it, or how special the sack was.
like the modern historiography I see is that like to completely ignore that Japan had invaded China. Now I think
Oh.
I don't know how much of that is China itself because they don't want to acknowledge that the country was under the leadership of the KMT at the time. Um, but I
To
feel
be
like
fair, in the Western world, there's so little written about China's role in World War II, the extent and truthfulness of China's own claims of Soviet or not Soviet Chinese of Japanese war crimes, and then the Civil War afterwards. There's almost no popular historiography that people can read about it. I don't think that there's a single narrative history or anything like that about the Chinese Civil War or the Chinese front during World War II. I could be wrong, but I've looked on Amazon at least.
when I read Mao the Untold Story, his historiography was that the communists really didn't do anything. They just did like
Well, they didn't, but the thing was is that they're able to build up throughout the war.
mhm.
Because, like I said, they just controlled dots and lines, the Japanese, and that they didn't molest the Chinese, who were developing a guerrilla army to fight the nationalists. Why the Chinese or the Japanese just attacked the nationalists the whole time? Is that basically what it said?
Yeah, it said. Well, he said that the Mao just kind of did token attacks, like token
Mhm.
guerrilla attacks, and then like just played it up in propaganda that he was the
Yes.
defender of China.
That's what Fairbanks says, and I haven't read Mao the Untold Story. I have it though, but I read The Great Chinese Revolution by John King Fairbank, and that's what it said.
Now, a lot of people have heavily criticized that book, but a lot of it's kind of like you know how like the empress like she has gone through like first historians were like yes she was the worst leader of a great power in the 19th century, and now like the anti-racist feminist brigade is like oh no she was awesome, she was modernizing China. It's just racist sexist Westerners who don't understand her like big brainedness. So I kind of feel like with yeah, you have a similar thing going on there with Mao.
I mean, the Chinese Communist Party denies the existence of the warlords era.
Yeah, in
I mean, they don't allow Hearts of Iron to be published in China because they say the warlords weren't real.
I think they acknowledged that their historiography was that China was united under the KMT at the time,
Mhm.
but yeah, they won't show China as divided. So yeah, East Asia is just a mess. I just my kind of feeling towards Japan is they kind of got high off of their own LARP, and their
Mhm.
LARP was reinforced by the fact that everyone they were fighting was either fighting them from too far away or were just incompetent or incapable of putting up a resistance. So they started to like,
Or at least initial resistance.
yeah. So like their thing was reinforced because I mean, let's look at it. Like the Russians got curb stomped during the Russo-Japanese War. largely because there's no way for them to fight a war in like Far East Asia. At
They
least at
curb
the time.
stomped all the German colonies during World War One.
Which, I mean,
Then they occupied Manchuria with almost no casualties whatsoever, which
like,
is like I think several times bigger than Japan.
hmm then they beat up America, the Philippines, Britain. So I think like their kind of LARP was reinforced, and I don't use that as like a derogatory term. Like they literally were like, "We are the divine Japanese race, and it is our destiny that all of the world shall bow before us." And like,
We will be the mandate of heaven over the entire Asiatic peoples.
that's another video. I'm sorry we're getting kind of. Well, this is kind of about World War II. We'll
No,
get
this
back
is
to
all
Germany.
about World War II. It's just after we've done streaming, you need to change could the Axis have won
Could
instead
be.
of just Germany.
Yeah, I'll just change that now. But okay. So what was I thinking of? Sorry, I was gonna say something about Japan again. Um, yeah. So sorry, I lost my train of thought there completely. Um,
What were you saying?
I lost my
If you lost your train of thought, do you want to go back to Germany again?
Sure, let's go back to Germany. Oh no, sorry,
So,
I got it. Okay. The funny thing is the idea of the emperor's divinity was kind of like a product of the Meiji era.
Mhm.
Like the idea, like the god
Well,
emperor of Japan.
wasn't Buddhism overwhelmingly the? I mean, Shintoism is basically a collection of superstitions about ghosts and like rituals and family worship, right? Family
Yeah,
worship rituals and superstitions about ghosts.
one of the things
It's
that
not even
happened.
a full religion.
Well, there was something called sect Shinto, which was the
Hmm.
more religious aspect, and sect Shinto was basically banned and dismantled, as was Buddhism during the Meiji period
Hmm.
and the Showa period. So Japan basically destroyed most of the actual native religious aspects and just merged everything into emperor worship. So like all the local, I think they forced all the temples to switch to a god that was more closely associated with the
Isn't it
emperor.
the fire god? The fire god of the Shinto pantheon?
Amaterasu.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like her role became vastly increased,
Hmm.
and state worship and emperor. Because I mean, the emperor's always kind of been the spiritual head of Japan, but
Hmm.
the degree to which, and I think that's part of the reason today why Japan's such a secular country, because religion in Japan became almost completely political for a
Hmm.
generation.
Well, here's something else. If you destroy your traditional religions, it's no wonder why Japan has the most new religious movements in the world of any country.
Yeah, like during the Showa period, you had to be. I think during the Meiji period too, you had to be registered with the state Shinto
Well,
temple.
the creative religious movements goes back into the Meiji period. It's
Mhm.
not just something post World War II.
Uh,
Uh, wasn't a type of Pure Land Buddhism the dominant religion until the Meiji Restoration?
um, it was so the Iko-Iki or the kind of the main Pure Land school, kind of during the Warring States period in the immediate beginning and aftermath, they had kind of controlled large swaths of Japan, um, and they had a massive following among the peasantry. And kind of one of the things that brought an end to the Warring States period was Hideyoshi and Ieyasu and Nobunaga just waged like a campaign of extermination against Pure Land Buddhism
Hmm.
and more or less wiped it out. And what remained of Buddhism was once again just kind of converted into direct oversight by the state, which is kind of what led to the extermination of Christianity. Was fears that that was happening again, but that's kind of a
Right. So Japan has this history of being intimidated by peasant religiousness.
yeah. I think that's a fair way to put it. We aren't really sure for Chris. if Christianity was appealing more to the
The
upper
educated or the
class.
peasants?
Yeah, because Japan's had a lot of Christian prime ministers for some reason.
Well, in China, the Christians are overwhelmingly highly educated,
Hmm.
as they are throughout East Asian Christian converts.
Right.
So most of the reformists that created the Republic of China and then on were almost always devout Christians, usually Protestant.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess back to Germany. So at what point do you think Germany lost the war on the? So sorry. So just so kind of the kind of the I guess the revision of the revisionism is that the the original goal was the Caucasus, and Hitler's generals kept steering it towards Moscow, and that ultimately cost like just a lot of time, and it was very close. Like if you look at the map, they were very very close to cutting off Baku from the rest of Russia.
Hmm. Well, weren't you under the interpretation your whole life until very recently that Stalingrad was purely symbolic?
Yeah.
So that's something they teach you in high school. He wanted to take the city because it had Stalin's name, not because it would have cut off the Volga's transportation of oil to the Soviet armies up above it.
Yeah, and like there's some people who say, "Oh, well, they had Ural oil," and I everything I've seen is pretty consistently about 85% of oil came from like Baku.
Hmm.
So
I guess if they held, like if the Germans weren't able to take get past the North Caucasus Mountains, or at least for a certain period of time, they could have built oil tankers to send oil around in the Caspian Sea, but it would have still been greatly truncated their ability to
yeah, that
oil
would have been
their
a shit
armies.
show. I don't know if they have enough like capacity. It would be like there's a lot of reasons why that would be difficult.
Hmm.
It would have caused a massive disruption. I think the other thing, like, because people are once again on the whole like Hitler, madman Hitler, when Hitler didn't want to withdraw from any of the territory they overran. People are like, oh, it's because he's stubborn and he's stupid. But then you think about it again, you're like, well, but they occupied pretty much the entire food producing region of Russia. Oh, sorry, I missed that
Hmm.
super chat. Let me just scroll back up. My bad. Darth Kilhoun says, I'm writing an alt history where Kaiser comes back in 1925 after a commie uprising, and by modern days, like Man in the High Castle. I
That
think,
sounds interesting, but I don't know how to follow your logic with just one paragraph.
yeah. You can post more about that if you want, and we'll address it some more if you'd like. Um, because like one tick video I saw was even if there was a second Romania, it wouldn't have made up for the oil shortfall. But like I think without land lease and if they could have held on for a bit longer, like I think there was like widespread starvation that was going on in the Soviet Union by that
Oh,
point in
there
time.
was. You have to understand when the Allies cut off food aid, it immediately caused a famine in the post war years. There was a famine from 46 to 48 in the Soviet Union because America stopped supplying the Soviet Union with food immediately after World War II.
Like from 1940 to 1943, the number of agricultural workers in the Soviet Union declined by 50%.
Yes. So this guy's talking to me saying that Germany's allies were all useless. No, Hungary, Croatia, and Romania are all quite good allies. Romania, Romania constantly fueled Germany. Romania only surrendered until they were invaded by the Soviet Union. They didn't fight to the last man. Hungary fought far beyond Japan thought. Hungary fought to the absolute last man. Um, I mean, Italy flipped sides, but Romania and Hungary were very, very loyal to Germany.
Well, I think people have to understand they took immense casualties. Like They
Yeah,
carried.
I think more Romanians died than Americans did, for example. Here, I'll
Um,
look that up.
Once again, this is another like revisionist. The German historians wrote that like the Axis allies were useless as like
Hmm.
part of trying to play up the whole thing. Like they did fought, they just lost. I mean, there's a difference between not doing anything and just losing. I think Italy was as incompetent as is generally believed.
Yes, I would say that. Italy was highly. There were lots and lots and lots of spies in Italy who um, who did sabotage too.
That there's just a lot of other issues. Italy was kind of trying to punch above its weight. Someone says don't forget the effectiveness of the Italian Navy. Yeah, when
Yeah,
it got
Romania lost 500,000 total people, and then I think like not as much as the U.S., but like hundreds and hundreds of like multiple. I think like 150 to 200,000 soldiers.
let me look at Hungary.
Because Hungary fought to the absolute last man, and the Soviet Union sacked Budapest, and it was incredibly, incredibly brutal.
The Hungarians lost 5% of their population.
Hmm.
Um, Actually, it's interesting how Bulgaria wasn't in World War II.
Yeah, basic. So the strategy there was if Bulgaria amassed massive amounts of troops on their border,
Hmm.
they would essentially prevent Turkey from joining the Axis or the Allies.
Hmm.
So if Turkey declared war on Germany, immediately Bulgaria was to declare war on Turkey and invade European Turkey.
Also, Turkey. Also, I guess Bulgaria didn't want to go to war with Russia if they could avoid it.
Hmm.
But yeah, so Hungary. Let me see at the. Let's see how many people Romania lost because I remember Romania. Yeah, Romania lost 3% of its population. The Soviet Union lost. We don't know. It's hard to tell. Yeah. So the Hungarians lost like 20 times the number that the United States did relative to the size of their
Yeah.
population. Um,
Though the what is it? Hungary lost more people relative to their size of the population, according to Wikipedia, than China did.
I
So did Romania.
I well, the problem with China is okay. Oh, it says 1937 because it's hard to tell with China like what time period we're talking about because it went on so long.
Hmm.
Let's see here. So Turkey never considered entering. So Turkey was always going to enter the war on the side of the Allies. They didn't consider.
Yeah, they're always more inclined to fight on the side of the Allies.
Hmm. Let's see here. Croatia was useless. They inflamed the territories they held. Yeah, that's kind of true.
I shouldn't say that, Argent. Turkey was deeply inclined to be neutral,
Hmm.
and the Allies tried to force them to become allies constantly. And Germany always thought that it was far more likely that Turkey would flip and join, and eventually they did by in a symbolic way in deep in 1945, long past Germany was doomed.
So yeah, okay. So fuck you, Tuist says Croatia was useless. They pissed off everybody in the area and made the Serbs go into open rebellion, and the Germans had to keep going, sending troops in to quell it. Um, I think that actually is what happened, or at least some of it.
It's kind of interesting that the I'm tired now, but the eventually the Yugoslavian or Serbian monarchists joined the Croatian Ustasa at the end of the war to fight against the Yugoslavian communists.
That is really odd. Um,
Because sides flipped all the time in
mhm.
Croatia. The Croatians and the Italians, and because the Italians would like support their own. It's just weird if you get into the war in Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia, the
Mhm.
guerrilla war. It's just like the various guerrilla sides flipped sides and fought another and like joined the Axis and then joined the Allies and all kinds of shit.
Now, was Spain considering joining, or were they just kind of content to sit it out?
They wanted to be neutral the entire war.
I mean, they couldn't
Some
really.
people will say that Germany should have forced them, but Spain Spain would have been less helpful than Romania was.
It just would have made a bigger front. The only
Hmm.
thing, and I don't think they could have taken
Gibraltar.
Gibraltar because they've tried that in the past and it didn't work. So,
Hmm. That's what people always say. If they would have either Germany would have taken Spain and then forced Gibraltar, or Spain would have joined Germany and then forced Gibraltar. That ignores the history of Gibraltar being largely impenetrable from land invasion.
hmm so I
They
don't.
did send the Blue Division Tectonic Warrior. I know about that.
Weren't they like the? I think they were the best performing single division of the war.
Well,
Is
they
Franco.
were super veteran volunteers from the Spanish Civil War. They were like highly skilled.
That was another like Franco was a very shrewd operator because my understanding is part of that was to get rid of the most radical phalangists.
Hmm. Well,
Uh,
Franco was a complete genius,
mhm.
politically speaking. Like as a politician and how he managed Spain was completely genius in every way.
I almost want to do I need to do some more reading, but I'd almost like to do a stream about that just because you had some very interesting stuff one time I was talking to you about Spain being the most socialistic country in history.
Oh yeah, yeah. They had lots and lots and lots of cooperatives.
hmm But yeah, sometime we might want to do it just because it's a very interesting uh, perspective. Let me think. Portugal was neutral, right? Yeah, Portugal was neutral.
Yeah.
I think true neutral.
I don't remember. I haven't read that much about Portugal in the war.
I like all the random ass countries, like I think Brazil, like who just declared war at the like last minute.
No, Brazil fought through.
Oh, Brazil
They
did.
declared
Maybe I'm
war
thinking
in
of someone
'42.
else.
They
Oh, okay.
sent division and they fought in Italy.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else because I remember there
And
was
in
some.
World War One, Brazil sent a lot of like I think it sent its navy into the Mediterranean, and that
Right.
they sent like observers on the Western Front and stuff.
hmm let me see when people joined because I remember there were some who just joined like randomly, like at the end of the war. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, Ecuador, Paraguay, Uruguay, Venezuela, Argentina, Chile.
Well, they all so when most of the Western Hemisphere symbolic declarations of war was after Pearl Harbor, just so they could continue trading with the United States.
Yeah, that happened with a bunch of countries like Haiti and El Salvador.
Hmm.
Um, I something I always find kind of a meme was the war of
I just want to say something. What is like the best meme if you ever play Hearts of Iron?
what?
Allying with Argentina and making them join the Axis before the war, and then defeating the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom, and then sending all your troops by navy through the Atlantic to Argentina, and then conquering the United States by invading up from Argentina.
Yep. One of my favorite moments was creating. I called it the Aryan Republic of Texas. um, Yeah, and interesting because I was reading a bit about sorry, just jumping over the place. The you know how like the Maginot Line didn't go to Belgium,
Hmm.
and people act like France was just retarded, and that was the
Well,
reason.
France like knew like their entire strategy was around it not going to Belgium, and Belgium was extremely fortified.
I think also it was politically impossible to be guaranteeing Belgium's independence, but then like building a massive wall and being like,
Well, Belgium didn't thought that if it joined as an active ally to I don't know the Entente, if you want to call it that, and
Mhm.
then we call it the Allies, that would deliberately provoke Germany and it would lose like a trading partner.
Mhm.
So they didn't join in the Maginot Line.
Let's see here. Let me see here. Long live the Aryan Republic of Texas. Let's see here. Yeah, I wonder if I don't know. Italy is just kind of. Oh, no. What was I thinking? I was saying there was like some meme I was gonna bring up. Oh, I don't recall. But yeah, Germany. Like once again, it's just like the narrative is basically like that Hitler was insane, but
Well, that's always the narrative. They're high, like David Irving. I mean, the two things that he says in Hitler's War that caused so much controversy is that Himmler did the Holocaust largely in secret, and Hitler didn't support the Holocaust, of least of Germans.
hmm
And I'm not going to personally state any of this because we're going to get kicked off YouTube. And then if we do, number two is that Hitler was highly competent because it supports. It's just very funny how the current media wants to paint all its enemies as highly incompetent when Hitler was obviously extremely competent.
I mean, how if he was retarded, how did he dupe literally everybody in Europe?
Well, how many times did he dupe them?
Yeah, he achieved like pretty much all of Germany's geopolitical objectives without
Without a shot being fired.
Yeah.
Sometimes without having a standing army, like occupying the Ruhr.
Like if you look at how much territory he got, so was it that he got greedy, or did he just think he could win, or was it that he felt that unless Germany had
My
a supply
personal
of oil?
opinion is that he clearly thought. Well, this comes from A.J.P. Taylor's The Origins of the Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
He, because of how many times the Allies had folded before, he thought that he could just go to war with Poland and World War II wouldn't happen. And originally he wanted a localized war of the Soviet Union and Germany against Poland. And that it was to great surprise to him that the war became World War II.
Okay, here we go. Darth Kilhoun has made some more posts. Okay, so in 1925, Hindenburg is assassinated, which sparks communist uprisings, but are crushed by the Freikorps and German army, who then perform a coup and return Kaiser Wilhelm.
I don't think that they would put I don't know. I feel like he was disgraced.
Let's see here.
I mean, it's fun LARP, but...
The Baltics are invaded after Trotskyists rise up in the States and attempt a second Polish-Soviet war that sparks Ukrainian uprising and a huge second Russian civil. I don't know. I don't see how a Russian civil.
The more LARPy and alternate history, you either have to have like something that's highly, highly realistic, or just over the top crazy LARPiness. For like anything in between is really boring for alt history. So just LARP it up more.
Like Kaiserreich, where literally every country
Yes.
on Earth becomes a LARP fest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't see Germany being able to get the. Just reading some more of this.
Can I actually, like, if anybody's listening from the Kaiserreich team, I think that you should merchandise more, and you should do what not Total War, Warhammer 40K does, and have, like, all these books written inside the Kaiserreich universe.
I'd buy
Like,
them.
yeah, I think that should be where you take the direction of your franchise.
Because I think it's big enough now that it could be like a franchise or
Mhm.
something. Because they've done.
Because,
like,
I mean, it's bigger than the vanilla version of Hearts of Iron.
Yeah.
Like, it's more popular. And it's a lot funner to play because anything can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Almost most of the countries are relevant, and you can play and win as them.
Like I really enjoy. There's a Kaiserreich page on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
and they always take like modern events and like give them their spin. Like they did like a post on AOC, which was pretty funny.
Do you want? How many alternate histories of Axis Victory have you consumed?
The I haven't. I'm trying to think. I don't know if I've actually like read one.
I've read through Man in the High Castle. I've seen the Fatherland TV movie.
Hmm.
So Man in the High Castle is just a complete LARP fest, and it's a Philip K. Dick book, so there's no action whatsoever. But it's also a Philip K. Dick book, so it's a complete acid trip, and it's amazing.
I my issue is like
I never watched the TV show, and I don't really want
of
to.
all the alternate history things is Germany just loses like spontaneously to correct the timeline.
Oh, that happens in Fatherland. So in Fatherland, the Holocaust is a cover-up, and then some detectives discover that the Holocaust happened, and they publish it. So then the German state dissolves, and then the world knows peace.
Yeah, I just think it's lame because like they have, I forget there's a couple ones I've read that are uh like they start out as being alternate history, like where Charles Lindbergh becomes like president and like takes
Oh,
approach
what
of
is that called?
uh
It's
the
that's by
Great
that like
Derangement or
gay
something.
Jewish guy or something.
I forget. But then Germany
The
just wins
Plot Against
anyways.
America.
Yeah, the plot against America, and then Germany just loses anyways, and it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
And that's kind of my issue with a lot of them. Like, doesn't that happen in The Man in the High Castle?
No, the Man in the High Castle. It ends. So the book ends where there's imminent nuclear war between Japan and Germany,
Oh, okay.
and like the whole world's fucked.
In the
Like Germany's like an like an unstoppable like scientific force, and then Japan's like really nostalgic and like there's still America booze, so they're taking all these like American war trophies home. It's about this guy that makes American war trophies of fake antiques to sell to Japanese people,
hmm
and it ends with uh who sorry, it ends with Bormann dying and Goebbels succeeds him, and Goebbels is planning to start an intimate nuclear war with Japan.
Right.
And like Germany's like I think Germany started colonizing Mars and stuff in the 60s.
I never got. Why is Canada independent?
And I don't. It's not explained. There's no explanation.
I think
it's
he
just like one
forgot about
sentence.
it.
No, it's like one sentence in the book. It's like Bob Hope can get away with anything he wants as a comedian in Canada, or he can get away with a lot more.
Yeah, the main alternate history I've read is. Have you read the Southern Victory timeline at all?
No, I've never read it. I've just read summaries online.
I've read it up to World War II.
Okay. Is it? It seems just really cucky and just really bad history. Or at
Um,
least the Civil War parts aren't, and then World War II is like it's just Germany flipped on its head, and the blacks are the Jews or something.
yeah, like the World War One, I thought was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
The interwar period wasn't bad. World War Two though just seemed, although it was kind of interesting. He did a pretty good job, kind of doing parallels in a way that made sense. But
It's just I don't think it fits. I don't. I've thought of making my own like Civil War alternate history,
Mhm.
and I think that there would have been a great migration, and there would have been a lot less blacks in the South than there even is today.
Right, the other kind
Had
of
the Confederacy won.
I don't know. The other interesting alternate, just by the same author, was the World War series.
I never read those. I guess they're technically alternate fiction, but it's not an Axis victory.
Yeah, but
Did you read them or just look into them?
I read I think the first like two or three of them.
Do they just get how does he write as far as characters go? Is it just kind of generic and boring, and it's all about the alternate history?
Oh, there's a lot of random sex scenes.
I don't want to read it then.
He inserts One thing I will give him credit for is the point of view characters are often like actual historical people. Like
Hmm.
Teddy Roosevelt is a main character in How Few Remain. And kind of one of
Hmm.
my issues with a lot of alternate history is everybody's just like original characters. And then like
Hmm.
the people who show up um just the people like they just show up like very briefly like Schlieffen's a point of view character, Custer's a point of view character. Um, Jake Featherston's kind of random as like their Hitler analog. World War was interesting though. Um, Molotov yelling about how the like reptilian empire will soon have a workers' revolution was pretty.
Great.
he's like he's like the force your capitalist empire will soon fall. Um, Actually, it's kind of funny. This is completely off topic, but the reptilians aren't aware that non monarchical forms of government exist. So he created a uh, like their governmental system was empires. Then they had not empires, which were states that they were de facto monarchies, like Nazi Germany, but weren't for some reason. And then they had snout counting.
Is snout counting democracy?
Yeah, like there's some.
Is the Soviet Union considered snout counting, or was it
No,
considered not
it's a not
empire?
a not empire. It's kind of funny in it because like all the colonies immediately side with the reptilians.
Oh, they do. Is that how they conquer them?
Yeah, the first place they conquer is Warsaw during the Ghetto uprising.
Hmm.
The,
It
the
just seems silly to me.
yeah, like the German Reich actually survives.
I know that, and don't they have a nuclear war against them,
Yeah,
and they lose or something, or they do worse than the lizard people?
yeah, they do worse than the lizard people. It's like some random shit. The most random shit is that
It just sounds like it's funny. It doesn't sound like it's serious at all. Or does he try to make it serious?
he tries to make it serious.
Oh, I always thought it was just kind of like a bunch of joke books. It's actually serious.
It's semi-serious. I think like the
Oh,
funniest thing about it though is ginger is like a mixture of an aphrodisiac and like
yeah. I thought it's like
camping.
their crack is ginger.
Yeah, and
Does
like
the empire break down eventually, or like is bound like that we just like shock the shit out of them and then it ends?
I think that's it. There's like people who want it to continue. Um,
Hmm.
it's
Is
weird.
it? It's
It
just absurd to me to think that like it's just really really ahistorical because the colonies usually like all the colonies in World War II overwhelmingly fought for the most part fought for their colonial master. It's
hmm
just really absurd to me.
Yeah, it was a fucking weird
That's just
book.
bad history.
Like the Southern Victory time, I think it reminded me a lot of Kaiserreich. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the main inspiration for Kaiserreich.
Yeah.
Um, like a bunch of just random shit happens in it. Like
I've
the
wanted to read the Draken for a while, or the Draka.
I don't really get like why is that so big?
The Draka, I think Southern Victory is the biggest series, and then Draka's number two, or vice versa. But I don't know because the guy who writes is a really good author, and basically it's basically if you took a dystopian novel and mixed it with a slasher film. So it's like this horrible dystopia is coming to kill you, and you can't stop it.
Because doesn't Draka just like curb
It
stomp
just curb
everybody
stomps everyone,
outside
and
of
it just doesn't
America?
make any sense. Yeah, and America somehow survives.
And don't they ban Christianity?
Yeah, I think there's like I heard from people who've read it that there's just pages and pages and pages of like lesbian gang raping of nuns when they conquer Europe.
Uh huh. Like it sounds just so like because people keep telling me to review it. It just sounds really stupid.
Yeah, I've heard it's good.
Oh, it
but it's
is.
just yeah, I've heard it. The prose is really good
So
and
is it
stuff
like
like that.
Warhammer 40K or something?
It's basically Warhammer 40K, but instead of like uh these Catholic parody, it's a Nazi parody. But they also have like it's also the whole sci-fi thing where it's like these super girls that you want to have sex with.
So what is the
Like
like
it has like a
authors?
bunch of the Draka are like these lesbian super women that are supposed to be hot or something. I don't know.
So what is the authors like political?
Worldview.
Yeah.
Um, I think he's like a larpy hippie because his new books are like I don't remember what the series is called, but it's like um, it's about like being. It's kind of like Fallout, but it's like the hippie version of Fallout,
Hmm.
where they go back to land and stuff.
Just because I don't know, Draka almost seems like it's kind of like played straight, just from what I've read about it.
Hmm.
Let me see how
We
long is
got a
it.
little far afield, but I
Yeah,
mean
that's
both of
fine.
those are just alternate histories of World War II, just like very LARP tier, so it makes them fun.
Hmm. Um, I think though, like okay, so something we haven't mentioned that I think is very important is I think all the Germans' secret weapons would have totally paid off if they had only built the mouse. No, not even the
Is
mouse. If
it?
they had only built the rat. If they hadn't built the rat, then everything would have worked out. Have you seen the
You
rat?
know, is that the one that's like as big as a house, or it's like as big as a
Yeah,
like a
it's
cathedral or
it's
something?
yeah, it's.
It's just absurd.
Let me find it. Yeah, here we go. That's
SM
the Land
Sterling.
Cruiser. Let me just put a picture of it up.
I think it's called it's the Emberverse series, which is this post-apocalyptic kind of like hippie thing.
Yeah, that's what the rat was gonna look like.
Oh, I haven't seen it. I'm delayed, so should we actually like go back to talking about the logistics of Germany whaling? What do you think the post-war German world would have looked like? That's the sexiest thing I've ever seen. That rat.
It's another one.
It's literally a masterpiece.
Such a clusterfuck. Like
It literally looks like something out of a fucking Godzilla movie.
it was there. It was like gonna be the ultimate weapon.
Yes.
Let me see how many was this 1,000 tons? Yes, it was 1,000 ton tank with a crew of 40
It's so fucking hot.
and like battleship guns. Speed 40 kilometers an hour? Are you fucking kidding me? There's no way.
It wouldn't have been able to move. Isn't it just like a battleship that they stuck giant tank treads on?
I mean, the mouse was kind of a bad idea to begin with, but then they just like
Who even like is this real? Like did some guy actually get paid to like draw up designs for it or is it
I
just a
think
meme?
so. I think it was approved. I think what happened with a lot of these things is Hitler approved them, and then Speer just quietly like didn't do anything with it.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, I think Saron could have made a dent had the war gone on. So, do you want me to say how I think Germany could have won?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so Germany cuts off North Caucasus. Um, the Soviet Union goes backwards and just defends the Urals in the same way that China defends it. The war turns into this stalemate, and then the Western Allies bomb Germany and like invade Norway or invade like fight in North Africa for prolonged periods and just try to cut Germany off little by little, just like the Japanese theater.
Mm-hmm.
But Britain attempts to firebomb Germany, and Germany firebombs and eventually Saron's the UK until UK surrenders before the Western Allies develop nuclear weapons. Germany wins the war, devises some kind of peace with the Soviet Union, which resolves in either neutral or German allied Ukraine, Belarus, and Baltic states. Germany doesn't really commit any genocide on the Baltic states. The Baltic states become close allies of Germany. Germany doesn't, in fact, genocide all the Poles, but a much smaller version of Poland or surrounding the general government exists. I don't know if Hungary and Romania would have eventually gone to war. I assume that Germany would have prevented it eventually. Eventually, Serbia is reformed as a puppet government, and
What happens
Italy
with the
gains a lot
Caucasus?
more. What do you mean? Do you think the Caucasus would become independent states?
I mean, I don't think Germany can end the war without reliable access to oil.
Let's say that somehow the Soviet Union doesn't. Somehow Germany takes control of the oil in Azerbaijan and it's not completely destroyed by some miraculous miracle. Then.
No, I mean like as part of a peace treaty. I can't see them signing a peace treaty that doesn't.
Well, they can still trade with other countries for oil.
Right, that's true.
I mean, there's no reason. If the UK surrenders, don't you think that there'd be massive colonial riots against the UK? And then
Probably.
Germany could trade for oil with those colonies. In fact, exploit most of Africa in the same way just China is today.
Well, I mean, all they really need to do is to be able to trade with Venezuela or Mexico.
And Venezuela and Mexico traded with them pretty extensively before the war.
Yeah. Someone
I think
asked.
that was the main way they got their oil, in fact.
Someone asked, did Finland do anything in World War II? Finland in World War II.
Yes.
Yeah, is a bit. It's a bit of a meme because like the Allies were technically at war with Finland, but they like didn't really want to be because
They just kind of looked the other way.
they were very sympathetic towards like Finland, so they were just kind of like, yeah, we're at war with, we're totally at war. We got your back, Russia. We got your back against those damn Finns.
Well, eventually, what happened is that Finland just declared war on Germany and signed a peace treaty like immediately when the Soviet Union just started like the Soviet Union like steps like 1 foot into Finland and then they're like, we surrender. We're allies with you now, Western allies. And the Soviet Union is like, we wanted to make you our puppet. Fuck you.
Well, Finland
that's
wasn't
how
part of
Finland ended up
NATO,
being
so I guess it
Germany.
kind of worked.
Well, there's the Finlandization, which
Yeah.
is like, yeah, you know what that is, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So that's where the Soviet Union would impress upon a Western power or a power that would naturally be allied with the West to becoming neutral, and the press and the politics of the country are generally favorable towards the Soviet Union's interpretation of history. So there'd be like stamps that would commemorate Lenin and stuff in Finland.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it would have mattered if Finland had have done more? Because didn't they just reconquer the territory they lost in the Winter War and then stopped?
No, because they really can't do more because they don't have like all they have is infantry and horses.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't really. I don't think that they could have autonomously say invaded all the way to Murmansk and then put Murmansk under siege or something.
Right. Could they have won against Britain? I guess maybe that's the only thing we haven't really touched on.
Well, that's what I was saying in my alternate history.
I mean, without sarin gas, like if they just had have been smarter with how they. Were.
I don't think. I think so. Here's the thing. I think of the major allies, Britain was the most fragile to heavy casualties.
Right.
I don't think Britain could have persisted if they were taking hundreds of thousands of casualties. I mean, the United Kingdom, I think the United States had, I think, 2 times as much casualties as France and Britain combined, and that was military alone. So the United States was much, much more willing to expend troops.
I mean,
than
but
the
without
United Kingdom
sarin
was.
gas, does Germany have a way of forcing the UK to the negotiation?
I guess if they developed fire bombings which were as comparable as like what happened to Hamburg and Dresden.
I'm not sure if the UK was running low on oil. That would be an interesting.
I thought that they were.
Oh, they were? Okay, so.
Yeah. If So if the United States never joined, then I'm pretty sure Britain would have dropped out eventually.
Hmm.
Like, I'm sorry, and I don't want to be the guy that's like, America, fuck yeah. But I think that left wing academia in the Western world has written America's part to play in winning World War II out. I think it's an actually anti American bias.
Like how Land
I
Lease
think,
didn't do anything for the Soviet Union.
yes, yes. I think that Land Lease and the victory, the American contribution to the Battle of the Atlantic, was highly important to defeating Germany.
Well, yeah, because I mean, there's as I said, there's two ways Germany can
If
win.
America wasn't in and Germany still lost the Battle of Stalingrad, it would have been a stalemate because the Soviet Union couldn't maintain a constant offensive against Germany
It might have
without the
even
massive
like
supplies.
I
It
don't
might
know.
have even not mattered.
No, I mean it might have. They might have still like if they couldn't launch a massive offensive, Germany would keep holding the Ukraine, and the food situation would just get worse and worse.
Yes. Because there couldn't have been a Battle of Kursk and there couldn't have been the advance afterwards without the United States.
Another, sorry, just we're talking about memes. A big meme is that the Sherman was a bad tank. I just wanted to bring that up because it's
Oh,
a
the
meme that
Sherman's
irritates me
probably the best tank of the war.
because it worked.
No, because it worked in both the Pacific, North Africa, Eastern Europe, Western
No,
Europe.
no,
It
I
was
mean it like
incredibly
it
cheap.
actually worked. Like the German tanks
Yes.
didn't work.
Well, the T-34 is incredibly uncomfortable, and that if it's destroyed, the entire tank crew dies
Hmm.
because you can't get out of it.
Right. I mean, like the Sherman, like the other thing I think people don't
The
understand.
Sherman was very easily modified, so the United Kingdom and the United States and the Soviet Union, to a much lesser extent, heavily modified the Sherman to do multiple tasks that it wasn't built for, such as mine clearing and flamethrower use.
My understanding is the Soviets actually liked the Shermans they got. I think it's a
I
meme.
haven't read that much on it.
I just was listening to a historian once, and he said they liked them because they like worked. Um,
Yeah, I also well, they're very comfortable compared. The T-34 is a horrible thing to be in. It's very cramped and you can't escape it.
hmm Um. Yeah. So the T-30. The other thing people don't get is that the Americans used anti-tank guns against other tanks. Shermans aren't designed to kill other. I mean, they can, but they're
Well, they
designed.
weren't originally designed. Well, it didn't really matter because what effectively happened is that the United States and Britain developed rocket-based fighter bombers
Hmm.
that did most of the anti-tank roles from Normandy on.
Hmm.
And the other thing is that it doesn't matter if a Tiger can beat multiple Shermans if the tire doesn't have oil and there's only one Tiger and
And
50
it
Shermans.
and it breaks down like
Hmm.
constantly.
Like, the reliability of a tank is much, much, much more important than its ability in combat. Because combat is really rare. What a tank is mostly doing is holding ground and forcing infantry to retreat. It's not engaging in anti-tank battles is like a very secondary role that's pretty
Well,
rare.
infantry support is like because and the Sherman had like 250 cals and like a rapid
I thought it
fire.
had more than that.
I think like turreted guns. Let me see here.
Well, I mean, the Sherman was used into the 70s by
Israel.
Israel. Yeah, in combat, and it was still able to defeat like T-55s and even like T-64s, I think.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's. Do you think D-Day mattered? I guess maybe that's the. If you didn't have anything else, that's kind of what we can end
Do
on.
I think I think at that point the Soviet Union would have won.
Do you think D-Day was more about preventing a continental Soviet Union?
No, I think it's a lot about. I mean, there's certain to that extent, but it was. I mean, if D-Day didn't happen, the native partisans of France or Italy could have switched to communism. Like, I don't think that the Soviet Union would have liberated France, that Germany would have resisted past the borders of a Soviet invasion of Germany. I think there would have been a mass uprising that would have been tilted towards communism in France, in the Low Countries, in Italy, especially Italy and
Well, that
France.
basically like almost happened.
hmm It was very, very close, like a hair that Italy became would like. It was basically Pius XII and the U.S. occupation that prevented Italy from becoming a communist
Well,
country
even
by a
after
hair.
that, the entire like Cold War period, Italy almost continually like almost became a
Yeah, the
communist,
communists into the 70s were highly popular in Italy.
mainly because of Central Italy. It's interesting because the French communists actually won an election after World War II, but
hmm
they had disavowed the Soviet Union.
Oh, I thought that the Italian communists were very pro-Soviet,
No. This though the Italians were like full on like Stalinism, but
very tanky. And then the French were like cuck communists.
yeah, um, but yeah. So I think that's probably what happened with D-Day. I guess the question is always whether or not the Western Allies should have tried to push further east.
Yeah, I don't think it would have effectively mattered.
hmm
What
Just if they
like
could have maybe gotten to
well, it's at
check.
their benefit. It's at their benefit the more people that the Soviet Union lost.
No, I mean, but
Like,
if they could have taken the Czech Republic maybe and made it into a
well,
Western.
they did.
Oh, they
Like
did.
the Czech Republic was a neutral country, and then there was a coup d'état that took it over
Right.
in '49.
Austria was weird.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really long to go into how Austria became neutral instead of Soviet because, or
Intervention
or
from the Virgin Mary.
I don't know,
Do you know
but
about the Rosary Crusade?
in Austria,
Yeah.
no,
Oh, after
I
World
never
War
heard
II,
about
the
that.
entire country, from my understanding, all just prayed the Rosary like constantly, and there was like huge like processions that Russia would leave.
I know that the communist Poland actually intensified Polish piety.
Really,
Like the Poles became more religious during the Cold War than they were before it.
the government was very anti-clerical, though, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, what they're trying to do is that they're trying to rapidly urbanize Poland
Mm-hmm.
because they thought that the people would become less religious. But even if they didn't attend church, it backfired
I
because
th-
they're trying to force all these Poles into like these, the Soviet style concrete apartment blocks, and they resisted it. And I
I
mean, Poland flipped back and forth between being a very liberal communist country multiple times and being hardline.
I think though the most anti-religious were Romania and Albania.
Yeah, I like at the end, like Albania banned Orthodox and Muslim beards. I think eventually Ceausescu supported like Romanian neo-paganism and stuff in the 80s.
But from everything I've heard, they were like the most brutal anti-clericalist. Um,
Yeah, I don't know about who's the most brutal anti. I think that I don't. I mean, Ceausescu has enemies in the Soviet Union and in the West, so. And I haven't read that much about Ceausescu. I've just heard,
base to Chesky.
podcasts. Yeah, yeah. Ceausescu held the Jews hostage and sold them back to Israel for money.
Yeah, Romania was. I remember the
Did
book.
you hear that when Ceausescu went to United Kingdom for a state visit, he stole the carpet and the drapes and the furniture from the hotel?
That's amazing. The book I read about one of the books I read about North Korea referred to him as being the only convert to Judaism.
Yes, that's true. He went to North Korea and he was immensely impressed by it and tried to copy North Korea and Romania. Yeah, and if I remember correctly, at the very end, he started promoting like Romanian neo-paganism and stuff.
I feel with no Romanian GF.
Yeah, yeah,
I like
I've
Romanians.
had that feel, But the other thing is like the Albanians taught that like the Albanians were the indigenous race of Europe that like developed outside of like traditional anthropology, human evolution.
How crazy was Hoxha, or what's his name?
Hoja,
Yeah.
Anvar Hoja. I mean, the guy built tens of thousands of one-man bunkers to resist Yugoslavia.
The way they scammed China though was a thing of beauty.
Oh yeah.
We're not pro so we acknowledge Mao as the eternal leader of communism. Okay, so were we off topic?
Eventually, like they got in a fight with Mao, and they like even like went harder than Mao did, like in the very late end of Mao's regime.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, and we're off topic and we'll end soon, but Albania declared that they were leaving the Soviet sphere and that they were acknowledging China as the head of global communism. And China was like, "Holy shit, someone's actually listening to us." And then Albania's like, "We're gonna hold the line for you, China, but you need to make it worth our while." So China was like sending them like huge amounts of food aid during the Great Famine, and they were.
I think also like when Albania left the Warsaw like they left the Warsaw Pact like immediately, and then they sent like engineers to like they waited until like the Soviet submarines that were docked in Albania went to shore and the crew went to shore, and then they sent like special forces into the submarines to steal them from the Soviet Union. And then they just took the submarines out at sea until the submarine crews left to go back to the Soviet Union. And just stole the Soviet ships that were docked in the Albanian ports.
But just the way China got scammed by the Albanians.
If I remember correctly, the Albanian Communist Party changed its. This happened in Mongolia too, but the Albanian Communist Party changed its name to like the Social Democratic Party of Albania, and then won the elections after the war.
I think that happened.
And that they've almost they've been in almost continual power since.
That also has kind of happened. That's in Moldova, I'm pretty sure, isn't it?
Yeah, and no, I think there's been multiple party changes in Moldova.
No, but I mean, they're still very competitive.
No, they're like dominant right now, if I remember correctly. Like they have like a super majority right now. The successor of the Communist Party in Moldova.
Slovakia is funny because it has like three major far right parties and the Nazbol
and
party.
They have a Nazbol party too, and they're all in coalition or something.
Yeah, the Nazbol party. Robert Fico, who is super based, was like, Slovakia has no mosques, nor do we want mosques. All Muslims in Slovakia will be under surveillance.
Didn't like the former Communist Party that became the Social Democratic Party in Romania add a constitutional amendment forever banning gay marriage this year?
It failed because not enough people turned out to vote.
Oh.
I think it got like, let me see here. The president of Romania is a massive cuck though. Because he is German, a Transylvanian.
Oh, wasn't that a thing? Like, there's a huge disproportionate German, like very wealthy population in Romania.
Okay, so in Romania, 93% voted to ban gay marriage, but it didn't get the 30% it needed.
Mm.
The president supports it because he's German. But anyways, that's I think probably good. Thanks for coming on, man. I that was a really fun stream.
Yeah, I've kind of had a hard day today, but I had a lot of fun on here.
Yep, thanks. It's always good to have you on, man. You're a fan favorite. I had a whole bunch of people who are like, "Oh, Serp's going to be on. Okay, we'll watch this."
Okay, was the audio better this time?
Yeah, audio was great.
Okay, so if I use my bed to absorb stuff, because I don't have carpets right now, and I have pretty high ceilings, so that's why I've had such bad audio. I mean, I can do that. We could do this like once or once a week or once every 2 weeks if you guys want.
Yeah, yeah, we'll just keep it open. I
We'll
mean,
just keep seeing what happens, though.
yeah, because there's lots of stuff that comes up, and we're both like in a situation where we're not like where we're just our schedules are more flexible now. So
Yeah. But I really appreciate you having me on. I guess this is the gay moment before we leave.
hmm all right, see you, man. God bless
Night, night.
everybody. Go to church this weekend, and yeah, good night.